Today we're going to be talking about testing in React. We're going to be working with Jest and Enzyme. We're going to be printing out some coverage reports for a simple little application that I built. It's going to be a little to-do app, and we're going to walk through some logic and write some tests for the logic that I have. I'm going to show you how to set up Jest and run a Jest environment so you can print some coverage reports and then run some snapshot tests. And so first we're going to get started by going to the Jest homepage. We're going to read through some documentation if you want to get more familiar. But long story short, Jest is a test framework, test library for primarily user interfaces. I've written some microservices that use Jest before, but I like to use it in React. It comes built in, like I said, with snapshot testing. So you can run some snapshots for your components, and it'll show you exactly what your component spits out, so that if anything changes, your test will fail and you can make those changes accordingly. So to get started here with our application and testing it, we're going to switch over to our terminal. I have my simple little app running at localhost 1234, so I'm going to open that up. And as you can see here, it's just a little to-do app. It's really simple. I can create a new to-do. So new to-do, it'll add it to the list. Another to-do, and I can delete these. I can complete them. I can uncomplete them, and so forth. So it's really simple. If I switch back to my package JSON, I'll show you what I have for dependencies. I have Babel core, Babel Jest. I have some plugin, transform ReactJS. I have class properties, the basics, whatever you'd use normally in your Babel and Webpack configuration. I'm using Enzyme. We're going to need Enzyme for this. You're going to need the React Enzyme adapter. You're going to need Jest, obviously. I'm using Parcel for this video. Some people like to use Webpack, obviously. I like to use Parcel for things like this because it gets up and running faster. We're using Babel preset stage 0. I'm using Lodash, React, React DOM, UUID. All these things you don't really need to worry about this. All you need to worry about is Babel Jest. You need to have presetting V with Jest and Babel Jest. You need to have, obviously, Jest and React Test Renderer and Enzyme. So you need a few things in this dev dependency list. I'm going to let you copy this. I'm going to let you pause the video and copy it, and then I'll show you what to do when it comes to setting up your Jest config and your Babel RC for this. So to switch over, my Babel RC looks like this. I have my presets, env stage 0. I have ReactJSX. I have transform class properties. This is for my own sake, so I can use autobind. I have setup test file, which will be ran as soon as our tests are ran. It just requires Enzyme. It requires the Enzyme adapter, and it configures Enzyme for this React version. So I can run these tests and I can shallow render some stuff, and Enzyme will be set up for that with React. Switch over to the Jest config. I have coverage collection true. I have a coverage directory, so it's going to be called coverage right here, you can see. I have my root test folder called __tests __, and I'm explicitly defining that here in roots. I have transform, so anything with .js in my test files will be babbled with Babel Jest. This is straight from Jest docs, by the way. I have coverage reports, so I can specify what I want my branches, functions, lines, and statements to be if anything is below these numbers. So this is percents here, by the way. So if anything's below 78%, it will fail, and it will fail your build too if you're using Circle CI or Travis CI or GitLab CI, any of that stuff. If you have your test cover script in your CI, it'll fail, which is really nice. And then I'm specifying my setup files, and I have my setup test file, which you just saw. So I would go ahead and copy this. All you have to do is name it jestconfig.js, jest.config.js, and Jest will automatically see that, and then it will configure Jest accordingly to your configuration here. So to switch over to my source file, kind of show you what I have so far. I have a simple HTML file. I have my index.js, which is rendering to the root of this the index.html. I have an app.js file, which has some basic logic for updating to-dos. I have a function here, which abstracts the rendering logic to a method, so I can test that individually. I have a CSS file. Obviously, I have my components. I have a higher order component here, which does nothing, by the way. It just wraps a component, so I can show you what it looks like to test a file or a component that's wrapped by a higher order component. I'll show you how to get around that. I have a text component here, which is just an input, which receives a value and an on-chains handler. I have a to-do item, which just renders some to-do information, and it calls another function when you want to update the completion, when you want to delete it, yada yada. So nothing too complex here. So if I go to my terminal, and sorry, I forgot to mention this, but I have a script for running tests with Jest. So all you have to do is just say Jest to run tests. I have a coverage script so I can run tests with coverage, and I have an open coverage script. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this coverage right here that I already have created because I was testing some stuff before this video. And I'm going to go into my terminal. I'm going to cd into my directory. I'm going to run npm run test cover. And if you followed my tips for setting up Jest, then this should create a coverage report for you. And I have a snapshot right here, which is failing. Sorry about that. I'll go into my tests and comment that out for now. We'll get to that in a second. But if I rerun this, npm run test cover, so nothing was found because I'm not doing anything with app. So to create a simple test, does something, because whatever you pull in and whatever is rendered in your test file is what it's going to be, is what is going to show up in your coverage report. So since app is my root level, it's going to render, it's going to have everything in my coverage report for my application. So if I do const wrapper equals shallow app, so I'm going to shallow render this app, and I'm going to say expect true to be false just to get a test to fail. So I'm going to run this. I should have one failing test, and I should see something in my coverage report, and I do. So I have statements needs to be 90%, but it's 32%. So yeah, so I have a bunch of stuff failing, and I have my one test failing. So if I switch back to my code, you'll see let me close this out again. Sometimes VS Code likes to bug out on me. So if I open this up again, okay, here we go. Here's my coverage report directory. And I can open that, and I have my lcov report, and I have all my stuff in there. So I can run my script that I created to open that, npm run open coverage. It'll go in that lcov report, open it up, and I can see my Istanbul coverage report here. And my folders are pre-printed with testing because that's what I'm using for, that's the directory for this video. So I can open testing source, and I see my app.js component here, and it has 0 statement coverage, 0 branch, 0 functions, 0 lines, nothing's tested. And I can see here that all this stuff highlighted in red is what I need to test. And this adds a cool little feature to testing. I know in the past, like I've tested microservices and node applications, and I didn't have coverage reporting, especially with Istanbul, and I never saw any of this red here. And the red allows you to see exactly what you need to test. When you test it, it goes away, and this coverage will boost. And it adds, I don't know, it adds some spice to testing. It makes it more interesting, in my opinion. So to get started here, I'm obviously importing my app component from the app folder. I'm going to test one of these methods here. And to do that, what you need to do is you need to create a wrapper, and we're going to shallow mount here. And shallow mounting is literally it's just rendering the component in a little Enzyme environment. And you can peel off methods from that by doing .instance, and this .instance will return your class component, and you can see the methods on that. And if you wanted to test lifecycle methods and you wanted to test the children that are rendered from those components, you can use mount, but we're not going to do that today. I suggest going on Enzyme docs and reading more about this. I'll have a link below in the description. But for now, we're just going to shallow render app, and we're going to say .instance. And if we console.log this, and I run my tests again, oops, sorry, that's my coverage. And I run my tests again, I'm going to see that it's wrapped with this higher order component. And my higher order component here has no state or anything like that, and that's because if I go into my cover or my source directory, go to components, higher order component, I don't have any state in here. So to get below that, to dive through this wrapped higher order component, and this is something that you'll run into in the wild. You'll have, if you're familiar with Redux, you'll have connections, you'll have inject if you're familiar with MobX. And to get around that, you can do this, you can dive, which I honestly don't like doing because sometimes I'll have 3 or 4 different higher order components wrapping my component. But if you want to dive, you can do that, and then I can see my state and my app component. I can see my methods, and that's kind of nice. But to show you a trick around that, some people don't know this. It's a really simple trick. But to avoid exporting your component with this wrapped higher order component, you can just go to the top and you can export this by itself. And this allows you to get around that. So you can, in your test file, you can just say app as app component if you want to do that. And instead of shallow mounting or shallow rendering app component or app, I'll just do app component here. And if I log that again, actually got to get rid of this dive because we don't have anything to dive through now. So if I run that test coverage, here we go. I can see all my methods on here and it's just the same. So that's a way to get around testing with wrapped higher order components, and that's really powerful. So to test our first method, we're going to test handle input change here. So I'm going to say handle input change should update state dot input value. I think I named it input value. So instance is returning, as you saw from the console, is returning a list of those methods. So I can do wrapper dot handle input change. And input change is going to take in an event object. So as you can see here, it's destructuring the target, and I'm getting target.value. So we need to pass in an event object. So I'm going to just say target, which is going to be an object with value on it, and I'm going to say hello YouTube. And then I'm going to console.log wrapper.state.input value. Run that test again. And here is my state. So it's actually updating state with this instance whenever you call this method. So now I can say expect wrapper.state.input value to be foo, because we want it to fail first before we get it to pass. So after this runs, we'll see expected it to be foo, but it's hello YouTube. So we'll copy that. We'll put that in here, and then we should have our first passing test. And we do, cool. So we have a passing test. If I go back to my coverage report, here is the red for that one method that we needed to test. And if I refresh this, we have this tested now. And this also tested this because we're mounting this, and it's kind of a hack. I know you shallow mount your component or shallow render your component, and it kind of tests things for you. It's like black box testing. But we're going to test that later. I'll let you guys do that on your own. I just wanted to show you what it looks like to test specific methods on a class component, I should say. And we'll do one more here. We're gonna do handle add to do. So I'll say it handle add to do. Create a little callback. Handle add to do should add a to do. Okay, so I'm gonna grab this piece of logic here. I'm gonna grab my wrapper. I'm gonna say expect wrapper.state.to-do list. I think I named it. .length to be 1. So by default, it's gonna be 1 because I have some default state. To do items, it's called to do items. So to do items is going to be 1 by default. I'm going to say wrapper.handle add to do. And handle add to do, once again, is calling event.prevent default. And this is a good little example of a trick we can do. So we're going to say const prevent default spy equals jest.fn. So we're going to create a jest function here. And this is very similar to sign-on spies if you're familiar with sign-on. So we're going to say prevent default is equal to prevent default spy. And then we can say expect prevent default spy.mock.calls.length to be 5,000. Obviously it's not going to be 5,000, but we want it to fail first. So let's just run this quick just to see if that was called during our function invocation. And received 1. obviously, because it was called once. So prevent default was called. So I can say, expect that to be, oops, sorry about that, that's my timer. So I can say, expect it to be 1. And if I refresh and run that coverage report again, now it's passing. And I'm going to add that to do here. So to add that to do, we're going to have to call this method because we need some type of input value state for it to add a new to do. So we're going to say wrapper.handle input change. We'll write a little test around that. So expect, just copy this test actually, just to be secure. So we're going to add the to do here. It's going to prevent default. And then I'm going to log console.log wrapper.state.todo items after this was called. So this is going to add a new to do, and we're just going to see that it was added. So current to do list, just so we can have it stand out in our log or in our console. So current to do list, we have 2 of them in there. So this is the one we just added. So we can say, before we call this, we have wrapper.state.todo items.length is equal to 1. We can get rid of this, and we can say it is now equal to 5,000 just to get to fail, because we wanted to see that it was equal to 2 before we get the test to pass. It's equal to 2, so now I can just put that in there, run this again, and now they're both passing. So if I go back to my coverage report here, this is the one that we just tested. So if I refresh, it is now passing. There's no red in here. And it's also, if you noticed, it made this not red anymore because this is actually, this handle add to do is calling create to do item. So if I were you, I would make a test around this just to make sure that it's returning this object with this structure, just to make sure in the future if someone changes it fails. But as you can see, this is extremely powerful. This is a great way of testing your components. You can, once again, you can create this wrapper, this shallow render right here, and you can just say .instance, and you can see all of the methods on your class. And .instance is extremely important. Make sure you do that. And if you had some required props in here in your component that you needed to pass down during this test, so say you were calling a callback that was passed into your component here inside of another function, you could just say on something equals, obviously this would be a function that you'd pass in, but if you needed some required prop, you could do that right there and that would pass. So it's literally just rendering a React component. So real quick, I wanted to show you another real quick hack to get around, it's not really a hack, but a helpful tip, I'll call it, on how to get around this issue right here. So when you have event handlers in your JSX, a lot of the time you'll see people doing anonymous functions, and they'll call whatever callback is passed into the component. And this will give people trouble when they're testing, because if you want to test this with this logic just like this, you'll have to mount the component, you'll have to do .find, you'll have to find this button, you'll have to simulate a click, then you'll have to see what that simulation was called with, blah, blah, blah. It's gross. What you can do is on toggle to do complete, here is in my app. So handle toggle to do complete. Right now it's just a function that takes in an ID and returns a call to this, that, set state. So this is returning void, this is returning undefined. But if I want to add a little trick to that, I can make this return an anonymous function. So I'll query this, and this is going to return an anonymous function, which then returns this .set state. So I can go in my to-do item here, where this is being called, and I can just remove this anonymous function, and I can just call this as soon as it goes into the component with ID. And the reason this works is because on toggle to do complete here, this is returning an anonymous function whenever this is called. So this on click handler will call this function that's returned from this whenever it's time to click on this button. And just to show you one more time, right here, it's taking in that ID, which you can see right here. It's returning an anonymous function, and this is what the event handler will pass the event object to, and it'll just call this .set state. So that's another way of getting around that. So if I run my coverage report again, right now this component's at 25%. It's really bad. if I run this and I refresh, that actually went up to 33% because now I don't have to worry about testing that. I can just test the method itself and make sure that it returns a function whenever this is called, instead of having to do simulations and clicks and all that stuff with Enzyme mount. So that's a neat little trick. One more thing we're going to add to this video before I let you guys go. I'm going to add a simple little snapshot test. And the snapshot test is just a test. Like I said, it spits out exactly what your component will return or render. And it spits it out in a string so Jest can do a comparison every time those tests are run. So if anything was changed, if you added a new class, if you added a new element to the render of your component, it will fail that snapshot test and show you like, hey, something's changed, you need to check it out just to make sure that you're not shipping some weird stuff. So I'm going to say renderer, because that's this React test renderer that we're importing. I'm going to say .create, and I'm going to pass in this component, which is our app, and I'm going to say to.json, and that's going to create that string. And it's going to create a nice little snapshots directory right inside of my source here. And it's going to have that file in it. I'm going to say expect the tree that's returned from this to match that snapshot. And so if I run my tests, hopefully this will work. Last time I had trouble with VS Code, but it'll create that snapshot. We get this to pass. And here we go. Cool, it worked this time. We have our snapshots directory inside of our source. And to show you what it looks like, it creates this snapshot. And we can see everything that's returned from our app. So if we go into our app right now, and this is a dumb class right here. I was testing some stuff, but I'll add an even dumber class and name it class. And I rerun this, this should fail. And it does. So it fails because before there wasn't this extra class on here, but now there is. So if you encounter a problem like this, you want to update that snapshot, what you can do is you can go in your package and you can just pass this -u to your test script. So if you run jest-u, it'll update the snapshot. So I can run npm run or npm test. It'll pass -u to Jest, it'll run my test again, and it'll update that snapshot. And now if I go in my snapshot here, maybe I'll be able to see the change. Here we go. So this is the root, and that's the class I just added. So now, if I run test cover again, it'll pass. And some people love them, some people hate them. I have mixed feelings about them. Sometimes I like them, but during CI they end up messing up somehow, so I end up getting aggravated. But once again, before I end this video, I'm going to go back through what we did. We have these dependencies that I'll let you copy. This project will be under my GitHub, and I'll have a link to it if you want to just clone it and test some things yourself. We have our Jest config here with our coverage report, coverage threshold. We have Babel Jest running for all of the test files that are encountered with this regex pattern. We have our setup test file, which uses the Enzyme adapter and Enzyme configure. And that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, we have Babel RC with our preset env. So those are the only things you really need. That will create coverage reports for you. It'll create snapshots for you as long as you have this React test renderer test in your component. And yeah, we went through how to test. We went through how to avoid dealing with higher order components that wrap your component by just exporting it itself. And hopefully this video was helpful to you. I know I kind of went fast. I wanted to make this short and sweet. I wanted to get right to the meaty parts of testing. But if this helped you, feel free to subscribe and like and comment below. And if you want to see some things in the future, like you want to know how to test some service calls, if you're doing some Axios stuff and you want to test that with Jest mocking, feel free to comment. I might make a video on that in the future. But if not, thanks for watching.